The air in the house was thick, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. I couldn't take my eyes off the stack of papers in front of me. My fingers trembled as I traced her signature, Emily's. The house, the one I worked so hard to build for us, the place where I thought we were safe, now belonged to someone else. I could hardly breathe. How did we get here, I thought. My heart pounded as the weight of the betrayal settled in, the quiet knowing that she had signed it away, under duress or not. It didn't matter now. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you love, you know how this feels. Subscribe and tell me if you've ever felt like everything you trusted was suddenly slipping through your fingers. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I stepped through the door of the Charleston house, the one I'd promised Emily would always be hers, but nothing felt familiar. The air was thick with silence, the kind of silence that fills a place when it's been abandoned, not by people, but by joy, by love. The house, grand as ever, stood perfectly still, yet something was wrong, something I couldn't name. Then I heard it. The soft swish of something moving across the floor. I followed the sound, my heart picking up speed, my legs growing heavier with every step. And there she was, Emily, my daughter, the little girl I'd left behind 14 years ago. Only, she wasn't the woman I had imagined her to be. She was kneeling, a mop in her hands, pushing it across the marble floor with slow, methodical movements. Her hair, once thick and shining, hung dull and limp, her back slumped as if she'd forgotten how to stand tall. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't the life I'd fought for her to have. She should have been upstairs, creating, dreaming. Instead, she was here, on her knees, in the house I'd bought for her. Regret gnawed at me. Had I come back too late? I stood at the threshold, the weight of 14 years pressing against me. The mansion, still grand, still full of memories, felt colder now, more distant. I had left for so many reasons, trying to build a life of my own, of course, but also trying to escape the suffocating expectations that came with this house. Yet here I was, back in the place that had once been my pride, now feeling more like a burden. The air was thick with something unspoken, something heavy. It didn't smell like it used to, like fresh paint and old leather, but more like dust, like something forgotten. The polished floors, once so pristine, now had a slight dullness to them. I ran my fingers along the grand staircase, once so carefully maintained, but now it felt neglected, as if the house had been left to decay in ways I hadn't yet noticed. I moved deeper into the house, the weight of each step growing heavier with every room I entered. The grand chandelier still hung above the dining table, but it seemed out of place now, like a relic of another life. And then I saw it. The sofa cushions, once fluffed and arranged just so, were askew. The curtains, always drawn with precision, were slightly tangled, as if someone had been in a hurry. My heart sank. Who had been here? Who had taken control of this place? This wasn't the home I had left. Something was wrong. Someone was here, and I wasn't sure I was ready to find out who. I stood frozen at the doorway, my heart sinking as I took in the scene before me. Emily, my vibrant daughter, was no longer the same girl who had once laughed freely, her eyes bright with ambition and curiosity. She was hunched over, her hands trembling as she scrubbed at the floor with a mop, her movements stiff and robotic, as though she'd forgotten how to move with ease. I could barely breathe as I watched her, the weight of the years and the distance between us crashing down on me. I remembered her as a child, so full of life, her every step a dance, her eyes alight with dreams of a future so big she could barely contain it. But now, she looked nothing like that girl. Her face was pale, her skin drawn tight against her bones. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she kept her gaze low, her shoulders hunched as if she was expecting to be punished for simply existing. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw them. The faint bruises along her wrist, hidden just beneath the sleeve of her shirt. They were small, barely visible, but they spoke volumes. And the exhaustion in her movements, the way she flinched every time the mop scraped against the floor. It was all so wrong. This wasn't my daughter. This was someone who had been worn down, broken by something I hadn't been there to protect her from. And then I saw Jason and Linda, sitting on the sofa, casually chatting as though they didn't even notice the girl scrubbing their floors. Their presence was like a weight pressing down on everything, their entitlement, their indifference, just a quiet reminder of the power they held over her. I felt a wave of rage and guilt wash over me. This was far worse than I had ever imagined. Something was deeply wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about Emily, the girl I left behind, the one with bright eyes, always scribbling her dreams in notebooks, who used to dance around the kitchen, lost in her own world. She was fierce, independent, full of life. What had happened to that girl now? She barely even looked at me. Her body slumped in a way I'd never seen before, as if she was afraid to take up space in the world. I felt my heart twist. I had always been proud of her creativity, her determination to forge her own path. But something had clearly broken her, and I couldn't ignore the feeling that Jason had played a part in that. I'd noticed it early on, his subtle ways of controlling her, of making her feel small, like she wasn't enough on her own. At the time, I dismissed it as just a phase, a relationship dynamic I didn't fully understand. I should have seen it then, but I was too caught up in my own world, too focused on my work abroad. The guilt hit me like a wave. I left her. I abandoned her in search of my own fulfillment, and now I see what it cost her. I sacrificed years for my career, for my dreams, but I left behind the most important thing, my daughter. I should have been there. I should have seen the signs earlier. And now, all I can do is stand here, watching the life I built for her slip away. But I'm not going to let this continue. I won't stand by any longer. Something is very wrong, and I need to know what. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It started small, a flicker of oddness, something I couldn't quite place. Emily, for one, had never been one to avoid eye contact, but she did now. Each time our eyes met, she quickly looked away, as if I were an intrusion, a reminder of something she wanted to forget. Then there was Jason. He smiled, that same charming smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. And Linda, always so poised, always so perfectly composed, didn't seem at all surprised by the tension in the air. They were acting as though everything was fine, as though nothing had changed. But I could see it, feel it in the air. The house was too quiet, too still. I watched them both, Jason lounging on the couch, Linda flipping through a magazine as if the world outside didn't exist. But what about Emily? I felt my pulse quicken. Was she really okay? The more I observed, the more my doubts gnawed at me. Every moment with them felt like a mask, carefully crafted and yet so fragile. A small sound broke my thoughts, a door creaking open. I looked up to see Emily, slowly walking across the room, her movements stiff. She was exhausted, like she was carrying something heavy, but she barely acknowledged me. The fear that had been building inside me bloomed into full-fledged panic. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was horribly wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And the harder I tried to piece it together, the more everything slipped through my fingers. I picked up the folder without thinking, drawn to it by some instinct I couldn't place. It was one of the many papers scattered across the table, but something about it felt different. My hands shook as I flipped it open, the words on the page jumping out at me. I barely understood them at first. A deed, a transfer of property. The house. It took a moment for it to sink in. Too long. Maybe. My mind refused to wrap itself around it. The signature at the bottom, Emily's signature. She had signed it away. No, it couldn't be. I stared at the paper, my pulse quickening. How? How could she? How could anyone? How could he get her to sign this? The house, the one I bought for her, the home I envisioned her thriving in. It was no longer hers. The room felt too small, the walls closing in on me. Anger rose, sharp and sudden, flooding my chest. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand answers. But all I could do was stand there, numb, my fingers trembling as I traced the words on the page. How had this happened? How had I missed it? She was my daughter, and I wasn't here for her. I left her alone with him, with them. It felt like a betrayal so deep it cut through the marrow of my bones. I thought this house was my gift to her, a place where she could build her own life, free from the struggles we had known. But now it was a symbol of something darker. I stared at the paper longer, trying to breathe through the rising panic. What had I missed? What was I going to do now? I could feel the distance between Emily and me, stretching out like a canyon, but I wasn't sure how to bridge it. My heart was torn between anger and an aching need to understand, to hear her, to know what had led her to this. I took a step closer, and she didn't flinch. Her eyes were red, her face drawn, and I could see the exhaustion in her posture, the weight she'd been carrying alone for too long. I don't understand. Emily, I whispered, the words barely audible. How could you do this? How could you sign it away? Her gaze dropped to the floor, and I felt the silence stretch between us. It wasn't the angry silence of someone avoiding confrontation, but the tired, heavy silence of a woman who had been fighting something too big to fight alone. I could feel her pain before she spoke, like the air thickening with it. She shook her head slowly, her voice soft but breaking. I didn't know what else to do. He said it would be temporary, just until I got better. But then everything started to feel like it wasn't mine anymore. Not even my own thoughts. I could feel the heartbreak rising in my chest, the guilt flooding me for not seeing it, for not being there when she needed me most. You shouldn't have had to carry that alone, I whispered, my voice cracking. I didn't want to burden you, she said, her voice almost a plea. I didn't want you to see me like this. I reached out, gently cupping her face in my hands. The distance between us had never felt more painful. But in that moment, something shifted. We were no longer just mother and daughter. We were two people, raw and broken, trying to find each other again. The healing wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. And that was enough. I felt my stomach churn as I stepped into the small, cramped space under the stairs where Emily had been sleeping. It wasn't a bedroom. It was barely a storage closet. A thin mattress on the floor, a folded blanket that looked more worn than comforting, and a few personal items shoved into a small drawer. There was no warmth here, no light, no space to breathe. The walls were too close, the air too thick. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was where my daughter had been sleeping in a corner of her own home, hidden away like an afterthought, while the rest of the house remained a shrine to a life she could never touch. I stood frozen, my mind racing to make sense of this, when my eyes caught a glimpse of something on the floor, a small folder tucked under the mattress. I opened it, and my heart nearly stopped. Inside were transaction records, money transfers, payments, names I didn't recognize. I could feel my blood run cold as I pieced together the financial trail. Jason's name was all over it, but not just his. Lorraine's too. Money being moved from one account to another. Money that should have been Emily's, funneled into accounts that weren't hers. Thousands of dollars, her salon money, her savings, gone, disappearing into something I could hardly comprehend. The rage swelled inside me like a tidal wave, but it was nothing compared to the heartbreak. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't known. The betrayal stung deeper than anything I had ever felt. My daughter had been exploited, manipulated, and I hadn't been there. The weight of this revelation pressed down on me. I was too late, and I couldn't change it now. But I could stop it from going further. I had to. There was no other choice. I couldn't stay silent anymore. The truth had burned through me, a fire I couldn't ignore. I thought I could walk away from this, but I couldn't. Not anymore. Emily had been betrayed, manipulated, controlled, robbed of everything she deserved. And I had let it happen. I had been too far away, too focused on my work, too blind to see the damage done right under my nose. But now, I saw it all, and I wasn't going to let it go. I had to act. I owed it to Emily, to myself, and to the future we could still salvage. The house, the money, the lies. It was all a web they had woven around her. Jason, Lorraine. They thought they could control her, and they thought they could control me too. But they were wrong. This was my daughter, my flesh and blood, and I would not stand by while they tore her apart. I thought about the years I had spent away, the sacrifices I made, and the price Emily had paid for my absence. How could I have left her alone? How could I have let someone like Jason take over her life? But this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. I would fight for her. I would fight for her home, for her dignity, for her future, the law, confrontation, whatever it took. I wasn't waiting any longer. I would not be silent. The first step would be hard, but I was ready to take back what was hers, ready to make them see that I was not going to let them get away with it. I've been through so much in the past few weeks, more than I ever thought I could handle. The weight of the betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, it all felt like it would swallow me whole. But now, as I sit here and breathe in the silence, I realize that something has shifted inside me. The chaos, the whirlwind of emotions, they've started to settle. I've learned a lot. I've learned that pain doesn't define me. It doesn't break me, even when it feels like it's tearing me apart. I've learned that the past can't be changed, but the future is mine to shape. And the most important thing I've learned is that my daughter and I, we still have each other. The road ahead won't be easy. We have a lot to rebuild, and I know that the scars of what she's been through won't disappear overnight. But we're not broken. We're not beyond repair, and we'll face this together, step by step. I've spent so many years chasing things outside of my control, but now I'm focusing on what truly matters. Emily, our relationship, our healing. There's no more running, no more pretending that things will just fix themselves. I'm here. I'm committed to making this right. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but for the first time in a long while, I can see a glimmer of hope. And that's enough for now. We'll take it one day at a time, and we'll rebuild together. It's hard to put into words how much this journey has meant to me. What I've shared with you all has been both painful and healing, and I'm so grateful for every moment of connection. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned so much along the way. I've learned that even in the darkest times, there's always the possibility of growth, and that healing doesn't have to be a solitary process. Looking back, I realize how much strength we can find in each other. We don't always have all the answers, but we have the courage to keep going. The support I've received from all of you has made all the difference, and for that, I'm beyond thankful. I want to invite you to share your own experiences, too. Maybe you've gone through something similar, or perhaps your journey has taken a different path. Whatever it may be, I would love to hear your thoughts. The comments section is open, and I want this to be a space where we can all learn from each other. As I take these next steps, I carry with me the hope that we are all stronger than we think, that we can rebuild, and that there's always room for growth, even in the hardest of times. Thank you for being a part of this with me. And as we continue forward, let's keep sharing, supporting, and building each other up